Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Wissam Hazaima from the university, from Jordan University. Today lecture title is the EU relation with the Islamic actors. The Islamic issue is always a gray area in the EU perspective when dealing with the Middle East in general. So there is always rising the question, who should we address in the Middle East, and how do we address the Islamists, and what kind of Islamists should we deal with? So there is always many questions regarding the Islamics in general and the importance of dealing with them from the EU perspective. Therefore, there is a dilemma on how the EU should treat Islamic actors today. And this is shown clearly with the struggles that they dealing or facing every day regarding Afghanistan or Islamic actors such as Taliban or even Al-Qaeda. So although most of the EU security issues today is that they're facing is related or to the Islamic actors, we see there is a neglection and marginalization in dealing directly with them. And since it is impossible to discuss all kinds of Islamic actors within this or within one session, this lecture will be about the Muslim Brotherhood. Why the Muslim Brotherhood? Because the Muslim Brotherhood is the most important, the biggest, oldest, most influential movement in the Middle East. Therefore, they have a special uniqueness toward them. The uniqueness comes from their acceptance to the EU and acceptance to all kinds of relation, whether bilateral or multilateral, with the EU generally. Therefore, this lecture will be divided into 3 stages. The first stage will be the establishment, and we speak about the Muslim Brotherhood formation and the start of the movement, the beginning of the movement dealing with colonization, moving into jurisprudence and how they become a regional actor. And thirdly, we will be discussing how the movement turned or became international movement and their diplomatic role within the Middle East. And in the end, we will complete by looking into the political forecast for the EU-Middle Eastern relation and the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in this relation generally. To start with the first stage, we have to mention or to speak about the beginning, or like the unity of analysis for discussing Islamic civilization. It is simple. When we study Europe, we always look as the base unit for analysis is the Westphalian Treaty, and we can understand how nation-state began and the relation between the European state based on that treaty. But when we study Islam or Islamic actors or the Middle East, we look to similar foundation. However, there were a city-state. Islam was a city-state, and the main legitimacy of ruling was or coming from Islam itself as a religion. Therefore, we had royal families, monarchs, that ruled in the name of Islam, and that gave them the legitimacy to continue. And the way they inherit power, it was by taking this legitimacy from each other. So for that, we had Umayyad, Abbasism, followed by Fatimids and Mamluk, reaching to the Ottomans or the Ottoman Empire. The fall of the Ottoman Empire is one of the biggest events in the history of the Islamic civilization, because after that, or after the First World War, after the collapse of the empire, colonization started to take root in the ground. Therefore, the main job of the main Islamic philosophers at the time is renewing Islam. Therefore, they call them reformist or renewalist of Islam. And therefore, in the hands of Jamal al-Din al-Afghani, Rashid Rida, Muhammad Abdo, they were gathering to create an Islamic renaissance in order to resist the European countries or the colonizers at the time. And therefore, they turned Islam from a religion into a tool to gather and unite people with each other. These ideas were very abstract and general, and in our understanding today, we shape them in the name of, they were calling like Jamal al-Din Afghani for a federation for the Islamic State, followed by Muhammad Abdo and Rashid Rida for a confederation for Islamic State in order to create the unity, in order to create this gathering by Islam as a main core in order to resist and liberate the Islamic land. But the idea, like nothing left from that idea, and it kept us abstract and theory till Muhammad Abdo made some kind of adjustment to create the Arab League that we have today. So at the time, or till this point, okay, Islamic renewal was just an idea. It is not political. It's just religion and trying to make it a political force. But with the appearance of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood in 1929, things changed. He was smart or actively used Western model in order to progress these ideas of unity and create the Muslim Brotherhood organization, an organization which use Islam as a political force in the society, but also mix national aspects into it in order to create it as a national movement as much as it is a religious movement. At the time, to do so, he followed the example of the YMCA, or Young Men's Christian Association in Egypt. That organization, along with the Christian youth, they were preaching in his hometown in Port Said, and from there he started to establish a model following them. In Port Said, in his doorstep, Al-Banna felt or got engaged directly with Western values through the German, French, and British soldiers at the time, and the kind of habits and the values that they brought with them to Egypt, such as drinking, prostitution, and they focused on these kind of stuff. As they are fighting the values of Islam. Therefore, we have to fight them back in order to liberate Egypt using a Western model, which was the Young Men's Christian Association. So he built in the Muslim Brotherhood within the same structure of the movement, of the association, preaching, community, squats, and so on, in order to do this liberation. And he was very successful in creating a core belief between a group of people in order to fight those colonizers. At the time, the Muslim Brotherhood was united by the idea of fighting the West. So they're looking to Europe as, or the interaction with Europe as a colonizer, as aggression, aggressive, or the oppression is from Europe. And the only relation should be like confrontation with Europe. So the relation at that time, it was the lowest in history. So following this, we can say that the bottom line, the creation or the establishment of the movement was directly influenced by Europe for liberation, and without the interaction with these European soldiers, we wouldn't have Islamic actors today, and we will not have definitely the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Muslim Brotherhood opened the door for this, for all kind of Islamic actors generally. Hassan al-Banna added to the organization, to the structure of the YMCA, and created what you call, or he developed what you call travelers troops. The traveler troops where main mission is to fight in Palestine. So there were militia and classical army works and gather people from all the Arab states in order to fight in Palestine and liberate Palestine. And one of the main trainers for this travelers was Jamal Abdel Nasser. So Jamal Abdel Nasser, the most charismatic, characteristic leader in the history of the Middle East, was actually working closely with the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine in 1948. So when he came to power in 1952, after his successful coup attempt, okay, the Muslim Brotherhood saw that he was one of them. Therefore, they were in alliances for a while. At that time, he or his legend started to grow after the tribal aggression, and he was able to stand against the Europeans. So he got so much popularity within the Arab world. Therefore, he made what you call the Spring, or the Arab Spring, or the Islamic Spring at the time. That means that he directly got engaged in financing and equipping movement and armies in order to make their similar coup attempt to Egypt or to his own coup attempt in countries like Iraq, Libya, Algeria, Yemen, Syria, and so on. Therefore, he divided the Arabs into two clubs, what we call them two clubs. A clubs for armies, presidencies, we call them the club of the republics, and a club for monarchs, where most of the monarchs, the Gulf states plus Jordan and Morocco. And if we look today to the Arab Spring now, we will see that all the springs and all the revolution happened in a republic countries, or a club of Nasser countries, not in the monarch generally. Therefore, his legend started to grow, and he got more support by most of Arab countries, till he made his move where he accused directly the Muslim Brotherhood for trying to assassinate him. And since then, the movement was banned in Egypt and in most of the republics, and started to work underground rather than directly and openly. So they didn't have relation with the EU publicly at the time, since they are banned and criminalized by the regime, and the regime started with a direct war against the Muslim Brotherhood, and they start to become enemy for the state within Nasser time. And the republics or the presidencies that follow his example. That kept happening until 1967 war. And when 1967 war took place, it was the biggest shock in the history of Arabs generally. And this shock comes because most of the regimes, or most of the Arab regimes, were getting their legitimacy from Palestine. Palestine and freeing Palestine was a core for the legitimacy of the rulers at the time. So failing to free Palestine and losing in the way they lost took out all of the credibility for the regimes. And since Nasser and most of the club of the presidency were fighting all kinds of rivals or opponent to them, didn't allow to any movement to grow at the time. And the Muslim Brotherhood, because they have a history, they were still working underground. So when they lost the 1967 war, there was no other ideology or no alternative to a secular, as the Muslim Brotherhood call them, armies in power, dictatorship, but the Islamic and mainly the Muslim Brotherhood. Therefore, in the 1967, we witnessed an Islamic awakening within the Middle East. The Muslim Brotherhood start to be the people of God, and the regime starts to be the people who are away of God or representing the people who are secular. Therefore, the Pan-Arabism ideology fell in front of the Muslim Brotherhood, and this wave of Islamization started to grow. And therefore, at this period, the Muslim Brotherhood had a mass recruitment. They were opening themselves up, and they showing themselves that they are the only mature movement and the only legitimate movement to speak about Islam, not the regime. And this is started to spread and grow within that period. So following the failure of 1967 war and the awakening or Islamic awakening in the period, this mass recruitment of the Muslim Brotherhood that they were gaining at that period was parallel for opening academically with Europe itself. So a lot of the Muslim Brotherhood and a lot of the Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers went to study in Europe, in the main countries that they were colonized by, such as England, France, and Germany, and Italy. And this led to a real existence of the Muslim Brotherhood as students within the academic body of Europe. And there they realized that they have a political freedom and a space to present their ideas regarding the Muslim Brotherhood, regarding their political views toward Palestine, Kashmir, and the United Nations resolutions more publicly and openly. And they found a space where they can reject and oppose their own regimes within Europe, a space that they didn't have within their countries. And there, they were able to participate and formulate in the political student bodies within Europe generally. and they were able to be active in a direct protest strikes against Israel and to all what they oppose as a Muslim Brotherhood. This freedom and this experience make them teach them a lot about Europe itself and democracy itself, and they started to accept the concept of pragmatism. Pragmatism started to be a style or a methodology for the Muslim Brotherhood to follow. In this sense, the students found a lot of support from a Muslim Brotherhood who were there inside Europe itself. A Muslim Brotherhood who, when their leadership were expelled by their countries, such as Al-Ghanouchi in England, and also migrant immigration movement of Muslim Brotherhood or Muslim Brotherhood sympathizer who went to Europe for economic purposes and created some kind of wealth. So the student and the expelled leadership and wealthy businessmen from the Muslim Brotherhood met in Europe, and they started to support those student movement of a brotherhood or sympathizer brotherhood students within their universities and within their regions against their own regimes or against the policies which is against the Muslim Brotherhood or the unity of the Muslim Brotherhood that they're talking about, which made those students a very new generation, a new generation of brotherhood who are academically very intellectual and open to the West. He understands the West from the inside. He can separate between the policy of a country and the people, and he started to believe in the democratic system within Europe and the importance of applying it within the Muslim Brotherhood itself. This slide is showing the internal organization of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan as an example, and how they become democratic within or influenced by those students who came back, the second generation in this stage. And as you see, the Muslim Brotherhood starts in the beginning as a usra. You don't choose to become a brotherhood. The brotherhood choose you. So when they choose you, you get to join a family or this usra, and they start to create some kind of activities with each other. And each usra have a leadership, and those leadership meet, and when they meet, they call them katiba, and the katiba have the right to choose or to elect candidates to join the Shura Council, which act as a parliament of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the parliament or the Shura Council elect its executive council, which works as the government of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Shura Council also elect the general supervisor. Each country in the world which have Muslim Brotherhood movement follow this system. And this system is very important because it shows you how they become international. So every branch of the Muslim Brotherhood have a general supervisor lead the movement within that country. But there is one supreme guide who act as the main mentor of the movement, and he's in Egypt usually. And in every country in the world, there is this internal organization. So there is a general supervisor for every branch of the Muslim Brotherhood all around the world. So in this system, we see that how when you are inside the movement, you have a strong democratic system where you can choose leadership from the base, from the Usra, until the general supervisor. So they are more democratic sometimes than the countries that they are in, and they have more democratic system than the states than the regimes themselves. So they adopted democracy and pragmatism inside the system, inside the Muslim Brotherhood structure, and started to refer it. Okay, and in here, you see how the pragmatism works by distributing and franchising the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood within each country that they are in. And this is example for the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, where it is important for them, the social wing, who's they adopt Muhammad Abdu and Rashid Rida ideas, where education is the most important element in growing the ideology. So we start by acting directly or indirectly to create the Muslim Brotherhood in the conscious of the people through teaching them within their own schools. Therefore, the Muslim Brotherhood have a social wing in Jordan, which is responsible about 33,000 orphans, 7,000 family, and they have more than 55 schools around the country, and mainly in the refugees camps. There is the Muslim Brotherhood itself as an association, and there is a political wing called the IAF, the Islamic Action Front, where it is the political party which participate in the elections or national elections, parliamentarian, or even the municipality level, or even within the universities, such as Jordan University election. And also very important to refer to the economic wing of the movement, which have banks such as the Islamic Bank and hospitals and even universities. So they are very aware for the importance of the economy. And the pragmatism comes or take place that even when the government want to close one kind of branch of the Muslim Brotherhood within the country, they still legally are allowed to work within other forms. For example, if you close the social wing, the association and the schools of the Muslim Brotherhood, they're still able to work as a political party and through their banks and their establishment or economic establishments. And even if you want to close the economic, there is the social wing and so on. Therefore, they distribute this kind of activities. And nowadays, like the net worth of the Muslim Brotherhood within some countries are over $50 billion. Therefore, that shows you how much successful economically they are generally. Leading to the third stage. And the third stage where they became international, and that started from the late 80s up to 2001. And to understand how diplomatically they were effective and how they were able to create change in the conflicts within the Middle East, I gathered those examples for you in order to clarify how they're acceptable for political regimes at the time. And starting from the first Gulf War between Iraq and Iran, and at the time Iran was accepting the Muslim Brotherhood as a mediator between it and Iraq. Saddam Hussein used the Muslim Brotherhood diplomacy, ad hoc diplomacy, to exchange within 8 years of war messages to the Iranian or the Persian regime at the period. Therefore, within the first Gulf War, Iraq was accepting and recognizing the Muslim Brotherhood diplomacy and their role in the conflict. The same with Iran. And later on, when the Gulf War took place, the Muslim Brotherhood had various activities showing a huge diplomatic role within that period. And starting from ad hoc diplomacy, as usual, they started to visit, or the Muslim Brotherhood created a group from different countries of the Muslim Brotherhood, from Egypt, Jordan, and even Iraq. And they started to travel around the Middle East to campaign for their solution to the second Gulf War between Iraq and Kuwait. And at the time, they visited Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Iran, meeting presidents and kings to mediate, and launching on and coming out in a press conferences to declare their findings to these meetings and their efforts for reaching a solution. And they come with very drastic and solution by replacing the coalition against Iraq by armies from Muslim countries, using Malaysia, Indonesia armies plus Iran in order to intervene in that conflict. They were speaking about the Kuwait right for self-determination, and at the same time not accepting the aggression which happens to Iraq. So using a balanced balanced kind of speech between two countries, showing how much they developed diplomatically in these press conferences and reaching to these solutions. And further, the conflict which happened in the end of the 1980s and up to 1994 between Iran and Saudi Arabia, where all diplomatic relations were shut between the two countries, and they closed both embassies at the time because of what they call it, the pilgrimage event, where more than 88 people died in Saudi Arabia from Iran. They were because they were protesting, the Iranians, within Saudi Arabia. At the time, they cut all the relations, and there was a very hostile kind of environment between the two countries, and Saudi Arabia and Iran accepted the Muslim Brotherhood effort for mediation at the time, and they were able within 3 years to loosen the conditions for returning the relation between the two countries and successfully bring it back in 1994. Further, Saudi Arabia used the Muslim Brotherhood heavily when they were drawing and creating the borders with Yemen at the time, and because of their existence in Yemen and their closeness to the Yemeni regime, they were able to successfully finish that kind of potential conflict. Further, they had international efforts, meeting even the head of the United Nations at the time, in order to secure the sovereignty of Yemen over the Juzur al-Hanash, the Hanash Island, where Eritrea, after their independence, they claimed that those islands belonged to Eritrea, and Saudi Arabia and Yemen used the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood used their relation with Turkey, and they made the direct connection with the Italy Ministry of Foreign Affairs to obtain all legal documents to guarantee the sovereignty of Yemen over this island, and led to the withdrawal of Eritrea from there. So within this time, we are speaking not only about organization who started as against the West, by those new leadership, the second generation who learned in Europe and came back to take and create a system or structure based on democracy within the Muslim Brotherhood in each branch of the Muslim Brotherhood around the world, led to greaten and push their role into the surface, and make them a great key for all kinds of conflicts which were happening within that period. So at the end of the 1990s, the Muslim Brotherhood branches started to grow all over the world, all over the Arab world, all over Europe itself. So we have from Egypt to Jordan to Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Indonesia, all the Islamic world, and every capital in Europe started to have a branch for the Muslim Brotherhood by the end of the 1990s. That's including China, South Africa, and both America. They were extended their existence toward all of these geographical areas to create real existence in over 164 countries around the world, making the Muslim Brotherhood not only regional movement, but also an international movement with a strong and economic wind around the world. And here, this massive growth was faced a great challenge for the regimes in the Middle East. Therefore, when 9/11 took place, it was the great excuse to accuse the Muslim Brotherhood of being a radical organization and working to ban the movement again and put it underground and stop this expansion that they have and the influence they have around the Middle East. So, therefore, the Middle East is problematic. Statistically speaking, over every 18 months, there is a war, revolution, coup attempt, or regional or regime change in the Middle East. For a long time, Europe was the main entity managing conflict in the Middle East, even being a venue for conflict resolution, such as seen in Oslo or in Madrid. However, the EU lost this role of mediator and marginalized local Islamists became a great role in the conflicts in the Middle East. This puts the security of Europe on the brink and become a challenge for the future. The EU has been absent for most of the recent issues, and when they have the intention to interact with any conflict, they do it bilaterally through the US or through the NATO. So rather than showing a diplomatic interaction with the conflicts, they use other actors to play their role. Since 9/11, the EU refused to deal with the Islamists in general. And as currently is we're seeing there is a prohibition for Islamic movements and putting them on a terrorist list, and such as Hamas, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, like some countries started to ban them in Western Europe. So this is not productive, and the prohibition rarely works, and their ideologies nor their organization will go away. They will always stay there. So not speaking with them doesn't make them go away, and they will still act and they will still be an actor in most of these conflicts which happening in the Middle East. At the end, the biggest future anticipated conflict is between the two religious countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia. And as we show in this lecture, that the Muslim Brotherhood was acceptable as an actor and as a mediator for both countries within the Iraqi First Gulf War between Iraq and Iran, or Saudi Arabia in order to make their borders with Yemen or with Iran pilgrimage issue. Therefore, this conflict will have huge consequences on the world, and Europe will suffer regarding oil, energy, immigration, refugees, food production issues, and it will have a huge impact. Therefore, not playing with the Muslim Brotherhood will be a big mistake. The Muslim Brotherhood is a Sunni, or representing the Sunni as Saudi Arabia. Therefore, in time of conflict, the Saudi Arabians will go to the Muslim Brotherhood, despite all the frenzies nowadays against the Muslim Brotherhood from Saudi Arabia. And it is proven that Iran have accepted them and used them in many ways. Therefore, the Muslim Brotherhood will play as an example for this conflict in the future conflicts a huge role. Therefore, banning them or neglecting them will not lead to better or involvement of Europe in the Middle East. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jean-Monnet, for giving me this chance to present this lecture.